Do you want to do an alien?
Are you getting hired by the History Channel? Because then you're absolutely doing the alien thing.
That's all they do now.
All they do is
I would
ancient
love to do
aliens.
a History Channel
Yeah, right.
show. That'd be fucking great.
Shout out to the History Channel.
Not sponsored.
Not sponsored.
Not.
But also not sponsored by...
But we are willing to be sponsored by the History Channel for shits and giggles.
Yeah.
Take a look at this.
Jesus Christ,
That right there is the mail. Now let's talk about the mail. Can we talk about the mail, please, Mac? I'm dying to talk about the mail with you all day, okay?
Piri Reis.
This name keeps coming up over and over again every day. Pepe's mail's getting sent back to me.
Piri Reis. Piri Reis.
Well, this whole box is
Piri Reis.
So I say to myself, I gotta find this guy. I gotta go up to his office. I gotta put his mail in the guy's goddamn hands. Otherwise, he's never gonna get it. It's gonna keep coming back down here. So I go up to his office, and what do I find out, Mac? What do I find out? There is no
Piri Reis.
The man does not exist, okay? So I decided, oh, shit, buddy. I gotta dig a little deeper. There's no...
Piri Reis.
Gotta be kidding me. I got boxes full of pepper.
Fuck it, we'll do it live.
Fuck it, we're doing it live.
Fuck it, we'll do it live. Tonight on Stumbling Down History Road, we're going to be talking about... do you want to say it? Because I can't...
We're going to be talking about a little bit of the most boring topic in the world made cool by who did it and how they did it, which is map making and piracy. Map making is boring, piracy is cool. Everyone loves pirates.
Yarg.
Yeah, right. I think people, ever since Pirates of the Caribbean came out years ago, I think that's all anyone thinks about when they think about pirates.
I think about other pirates.
Yeah, what are the pirates?
But slightly more specifically, like Piri Reis, right?
Yes, Piri Reis. Piri Reis was.
I'm Jackson.
Yeah, I'm just here.
I'm D.
And we got Jeff, as always.
Yeah, my name's Alex. I was conscripted into this forcibly, like a pirate.
Yarg.
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 So yeah, map making, cartography, Piri Reis, piracy, all this stuff sounds cool. Why is it boring?
I think a lot of people look at it the wrong way. Honestly, the era that it comes from is also not one that most people talk about in school. It's not one that people think about when they think about like the cool things they might have done over the course of their history, either in school or in college. Like, even if you like history.
Yeah, I
Some
mean,
people
usually
love history, but they don't think of like
maps
or maybe the 1400s to like
I think
1700s. You think of like Columbus. You think of how America was discovered, maybe Magellan, and then like anything past that, it starts to get hazy. I think for a lot of people.
I think that part of it is Pirates of the Caribbean, and part of it is unfortunately One Piece. I have opinions on that show. There is a cartographer. There is a cartographer on that as well.
Okay.
Their name is Nami. Nami.
You're doing that on purpose.
Yes, I am.
Always on purpose.
It's okay. Luffy won't mind.
I'll be honest. I haven't watched anime in a hot minute. But,
You're not missing much.
But I'm not missing much. That's what everyone tells me.
Anime was a mistake.
There are 1,100 episodes of this goddamn show, and they're still not even halfway done
with the storyline of the manga or whatever.
Yeah, probably.
Oh god, that's insane.
Yeah,
What?
it's okay.
What was the last arc?
I am poised to believe that in order it will be Berserk finishes, Hunter finishes, and then One Piece.
But never Game of Thrones, right?
No, he's gonna be dead.
Okay, good. Just checking.
He's just gonna be doing offshoots of like House of Dragons and shit, and making money that way. Then he'll die.
He had it. What happened was he soft launched the finish of the series with the ending of Game of Thrones because he told him how it was supposed to end.
Right.
People fucking hated it.
Nah.
And he's like, oh shit, I gotta completely redo this now in my head.
You do it.
Here we are.
Yeah, you do it. You do it. You do it if you could do better than me.
We have a live audience as well, off in the background. This is fact checker statistician Keena Bitch.
You might remember him from such episodes as
Benito Mussolini.
No, Comrade Stalin.
yeah, all right, whatever ones he was in, I don't remember. He's not that memorable. It's okay.
So I don't know where exactly to start the story.
Well, let's start
with There Be Dragons.
Let's start with Piri Reis.
Oh, which one? There Be Dragons or Piri Reis? They're both pretty cool stories.
Well, we're supposed to be talking about Paui.
Okay, so
I feel like we should talk about
Piri Reis was, in addition to being just a dude who made maps, and a very important one, and very important maps, and kind of You have to go a little. You have to take a step back to understand who he was and what he did, and then you can understand how he executed making these maps and like why the maps are cool. So Piri Reis himself came from a world picture where
He was Ottoman, correct?
he was Ottoman, where the Ottoman Empire was the preeminent power.
Arguably
in the
best
old
empire.
world. One of them.
Arguably best empire.
Not the largest, but close to it. The Mongol Empire being a little bit bigger, but
Well, just because it's bigger doesn't mean it's better. It's all about the motion of the ocean.
it's not. It's not the size that matters. That's right.
Yeah.
The
I mean, just look at what's their names in Jaws. They got that shark when they knew that they needed a bigger boat, but they did it anyway with the same size boat.
yeah, sure.
See?
And Jaws is a smaller shark and still a better movie than The Meg. There you go. Got him. So anyhow, Piri
Obligatory, correct.
Reis was a pirate captain. He was came from a scenario where in the 13, 14, 1500s, that's the 14th, 15th, 16th centuries, as the Ottoman Empire begins to grow in its existence and then growing in power.
This was pre-Columbus, correct?
And straight through when Columbus was alive, yes. When they were growing in power in Anatolia, which is basically what we picture now as part of Turkey,
Okay.
the steppes of the mountains of Turkey, they began their existence by being a semi-nomadic, horseback riding, kind of fast attacking soldier people, and they didn't have much else going on as far as their complexity or their sophistication in battle or warfare.
So that
And-
seems to be with a lot of like
Yeah.
that Central Eurasia.
Yes.
A lot of cultures.
Good
like,
at horse.
Good
Good
at-
at archery.
Good at horse, good at archery, fast moving, attacking. Don't have a lot to lose. Also, that probably goes into it, but that's like every soldier community, right? Like, this,
I mean, yeah.
They
Unless
fight-
you're Russia,
Well,
then you have nothing but people to lose.
well, I mean,
I was gonna say. I mean, because a lot before that with
the
like,
Mongols beat the Russians, though, right? And how did they do it? They did it by being better at doing what the Russians did than the Russians were.
I mean,
so.
to be fair, Japan
bodies
also
at
beat
it?
the Russians that one time too.
That one time. So
I got a sword from that one time somewhere. It's not on me.
So the Ottoman Empire starts as almost nothing. It starts as a principality of the Byzantine Empire. It grows. They declare independence. They're able to start striking out. And unironically, mentioning the Mongols is interesting because if it wasn't for the Mongols being to the east side of what became the Ottoman Empire, the Ottomans probably never would have flourished.
I might pull up a map here and be like, here is the diagram.
Yeah, I might be able to help you with that. But,
Diagram, say,
Human history
north,
is
Byzantine, east,
a
Mongol.
lot more stuff happens across all over time than people tend to kind of.
Oh,
think.
yeah. I mean, it's nuts how much actual shit happens
I
in the
mean-
middle of everything.
It's crazy when you think it's been about 2,000 years, and in that time, this whole world has done a lot of different bullshit at the same time.
And it's the same amount of land mass, but it's traded hands a lot. That's for
Oh, yeah.
Especially over here.
sure. Yeah, well, especially over here. But we don't talk about America.
We don't talk about that.
America. No, I don't talk about America. But the Ottoman Empire grew quickly over the
We will eventually.
right.
No.
Don't get me to
No.
talk about it.
No.
But the Ottoman Empire grew quickly over the paths that existed already from the previous empires, and then swelled in its wealth when it was able to eventually conquer Constantinople. Right, like that's
Once
that's the big
Istanbul?
thing. It was Constantinople.
Once Istanbul, now Constantinople.
Yeah, that's the one. And when they were able to take Constantinople, it was like an earthquake in the early modern world because Constantinople had been untakeable by anyone other than the Crusaders, who were already in the city when they took it, and kind of cheated by their being in the city and then attacking the city while in the city, invited by the king.
You know, I loosely think that we talked very briefly about this with like Vlad the Impaler.
Yeah, it would be the same era. It's the same era. So
Check out our Vlad the Impaler episode, right?
It wasn't very
Here.
great.
It was all right.
Oh, it's a shame. It's such a wealth of interesting history. But
Oh, I love Vlad the Impaler. He's
Vlad Dracul.
He's a dude.
Well, that's his father, Vlad.
And, well, his brother from another mother was one of the guys who was able to expand the Ottoman Empire almost more than anyone else, who was Mehmed the Conqueror.
Yes.
And Mehmed was able to both take Constantinople, solidify his holding around Constantinople.
And Vlad's brother.
And brother from another mother.
Well, his actual brother, Radu the Handsome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And was then succeeded by a series of decent expansionist Ottoman rulers, leading up to Suleiman the Magnificent, and then other rulers who follow after him. But the picture that you're talking about now, as far as Piri Reis goes, you're talking about the period between Mehmed and Suleiman, as far as like a period goes. We're talking about like his first map was made in 1513, then 1517, and then I brought a book.
His first was 1513. I thought that he
or 15.
I thought that he started it before.
So it started before because he had to gather other maps to make that map.
Yeah, I know that there
It's
is
nice leather.
like a very
That's
infamous
crazy.
1513 one, which a lot of people are like, "Oh, are aliens involved? Oh, what about ancient civilization? How did he know about Antarctica?"
Yes.
Thinking of which, are we doing that alien thing?
Not with me, you're not.
What alien thing?
The con. We'll get into that.
Are you? Do you
Are
want
you,
to do an alien?
are you getting hired by the History Channel? Because then you're absolutely doing the alien thing.
I would
That's
love-
all they do now.
All they do is
I would love
ancient
to do
aliens.
a History Channel
Yeah, right?
show. That'd be fucking great.
Shout out to the History Channel.
Not sponsored.
Not sponsored.
Not.
But also not sponsored by.
But we are willing to be sponsored by the History Channel for shits and giggles.
Yeah.
Also not sponsored by Metax.
Metaxa. It's
Very-
it's the Greek spirit for the evening that's going to carry us through this topic.
So,
So, Piri Reis, the suffix Reis, R-E-I-S, means that you are a captain in the military pirates, the privateers of the Ottoman Empire. What's a privateer? A privateer is
I was about to ask, what is a privateer?
yeah.
somebody
Most
with
people don't know
privates?
this. Something like that.
There are different types of pirates, as he's about to explain.
There's pirates who are hired directly by the crown of whatever country is hiring them, and then there's people who are considered corsairs. Corsairs are like freelance pirates that work for a crown, be it England, the Dutch, Spain, the Ottoman Empire, but aren't actually directly employed by them. In the case of Piri Reis and his bloodline, things like other famous Ottoman pirate captains like Barbarossa, or Piri Reis's uncle, who was also a famous pirate captain named Kamali Reis.
Blackbeard.
They tithe part of what they claim from their seizing of ships to the Sublime Porte, the capital of the Ottoman Empire. But they themselves work independently. It ends up being a good way for the Ottomans to operate because they don't actually have a very good navy. Not towards the beginning, not really at any time.
So they
until
just
towards their
hire.
height.
They hire people to do the jobs that they can't do.
Hire is a loose term for it. Most Greek, older Greek people who still harbor some resentment towards Turkey due to.
I know some people like that.
Well, it's interesting. It's a very difficult thing to completely square away because in Greece, where I come from, not me personally, but like where my family comes from, I come from an island called Chios, which is like you could throw a stone and hit the mainland Turkey. No one harbors resentments anymore. It's gone a long way to be ameliorated and kind of like smoothed over by earthquakes that happened more or less recently. The Greeks came in, helped the Turks. Then now Turks and Greeks go back and forth. They support each other with business as far as like vacationing.
Trade commodity, things
no,
like that, yeah.
vacationing. Like they go and they see each other. And when you see people who aren't from your culture regularly, which I'm sure you guys both probably support this idea, but when you see people who aren't from your culture regularly, there's a much lower chance of you just hating people. Because you see them, you know them, you get to like them.
No, I hate people.
Sure.
Period.
Okay, we're good.
I'm a misanthrope. But
Yeah. Well, hating everybody isn't the same as hating specific people just because they're not like.
Oh, you meant specific people. I just thought that you meant liking
Oh no,
people
yeah,
or hating
no.
people.
I'm not a racist. I'm a misanthrope.
Yeah, that's a totally different thing.
Yeah.
Hating everyone equally is different than hating specific people because of who they are, right?
Yes, factual statement. Let's change the subject.
So Greeks and Turks at this time
Squats and
absolutely were on different wavelengths, right? And to a greater or lesser extent, the Janissaries and also a lot of the Corsairs and the.
What's a Janissary?
Janissary
We
is a
briefly
soldier who was the elite shock corps of the Ottoman Empire. They were, in many cases, kidnapped at birth from one of the many satrapies of the Ottoman Empire.
You're going to have to explain that word, too.
Their regional capitals.
Okay.
Egypt and Greece and other places,
Think-
that aren't Turkish.
They're dukes.
But they're kind of under
effectively.
control of Turkey because of
Yeah, it's
reasons.
Well, I mean, the Turkish government at the time, and even still to some degree, was supposed to be set up to be tripartite, where like there's an offsetting of certain parts of the government by the Janissaries, then there's the royal household, and then there's the religious household. It obviously changes over time, but it's very detailed. Yes.
Kind of similar to.
Question from the audience.
What was Janissaries forcibly captured?
Speak up.
I was just asked about the treatment of the Janissaries as far as like their ability to continue to breed. That part of things is almost less important than the fact that they were taken as something called the sizyi, which is kind of like a tithing from foreign parents, and then removed from their house and then made into like super soldiers. They were just soldiers. That's all they did was soldier, right?
Have you ever seen? Sorry, you ever
ahead.
seen
They
the
were
movie?
Spartans?
You ever seen the movie Dracula Untold?
No, I haven't, unfortunately.
So-
is this a bad thing or a good thing?
It's an okay movie, but one of the big plot lines in the movie is he becomes a vampire to stop the Turks from taking more children from his homeland to
Yeah.
become Janissaries.
Okay.
So that's why he becomes a vampire, so he can either.
Yeah, Vlad hated the Ottomans.
Yes,
oh, he
he did.
hated the
Oh my
shit
God.
out of the
Well,
Ottomans.
Oh,
Shit ton of people that hated them.
Vlad.
to be fair, I
Vlad
think he
was
hated any-
stolen in some ways was a prisoner in the household of the Turks.
Yes, he was
at
given
the
as a
time when he was
political,
child anyway,
as a political prisoner,
And again, to be fair,
and
I
trained
do
as a janissary too at the time. Also,
Yeah.
that's
To
how
be-
he got so brutal.
to be fair, I do believe that he also just hated everybody, not his people.
You mean you don't just like crucify and impale your own people because you love them?
Well, he did that as a means of discipline. I can't say that with
You
a
can
straight
leave the
face.
golden cup in the middle of the square, and it would still be there in the morning.
I'll bet. Yeah. So, but the Janissaries and the Corsairs were both kind of conscripted the same way, forcibly, not in a way that they would have chosen to be, but as a result of them having no parent but the state, they were just soldiers, right? And the Corsairs were just naval members and officers,
Seamen.
better trained seamen would ascend into kind of like a higher class, and then there were like slaves who were in the galleys in the bottom doing the rowing thing.
Yeah.
And they were expendable. Unironically, many of them couldn't swim, but that's a problem maybe for another time.
And so Piri was
Piri Reis was one of the many people who was taken from one place, transplanted to another place, and became part of this.
he ended up
this
becoming an
brotherhood.
admiral, correct?
He was.
Yeah.
He was a Ghazi. A Ghazi is like a religious soldier at a war with the West. Solely holy war, whole time. That's all he's supposed to do, right?
Now, the West for them, because we think of the West here in America as like Japan. For the West for them, it's, well, I mean, let's be real.
The West,
kind of.
the West for the Ottoman Empire would have been
Physically, it's to our
the
west,
Pope
technically,
and his
More
Italian
along the
states.
Europeans.
The Italian states, the Spanish states,
Yeah.
and the British were
Christians
the
and
only things they
Catholics.
feared.
That's what I'm saying. For we tend to think in modern day like Japan, China, Korea, like that's
Oh, I see what you're saying.
that's what I was getting at.
It's
Oh,
not.
that's
It's
our
not. It's not the
physical West,
World
but-
War.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not the
So-
World War II kind of like.
No.
the
I
Allies and the
just
Axis.
wanted
We're
to
not
put it
doing
into perspective
Yeah.
of who their like big enemies were as the West.
that. Sure. So Europe. It would be Europe's. Anything that's west of Central Europe is basically what they were looking at.
We have a question from the peanut gallery.
Again.
Thank you very much, Jackson.
You're welcome.
What was the Janissaries from like Central Europe, Eastern Central Europe? something
No,
like that?
Janissaries could come from anywhere.
Can we repeat that question?
Yeah, or the Janissaries, mainly located. They're
Central
harvesting in Central Europe. So these groups, the ones that Piri Reis came from, one of their main tasks was to raid landed rich towns, things like Alexandria, going inland to Cairo, going all over Algeria, stuff like that, and get money. Or then eventually, once all those areas were conquered, they'd turn around and go to places like Malta, Sicily, parts of Italy, southern France.
If they could sail there,
It's where they'd hit, yeah. And for a long time, they were undeniable. Much like the Ottomans were undeniable at land, they were undeniable at sea. And everything for a very long time, for a very, very long time. We're talking
Until
about
they
maybe
hit the Vikings.
we're talking about maybe 150 years. The Ottomans were unstoppable. They would advance a little bit more all the time, to the point where parts of Europe were paying tribute to the Ottomans to not be conquered.
And if they were conquered, did they have to pay?
Obviously, yes.
The tithe?
No, the jizya for being an infidel.
Says ye.
Yeah.
So that's enforced on anyone that they controlled. Yeah.
The question was, if they were conquered, did they have to pay the sizza? The answer was yes.
Yes. Yeah. That's something that you'd have to do, and then there was like that, and there was slave taking, and the slave taking was on both sides, right? Because the Europeans
The
would
other
try
side would
would try to do the same thing.
Yeah.
They just weren't capable of actually doing that for a very long time. They weren't able to put up a resistance that was
Ottoman,
meaningful.
powerful.
Yeah.
They were gods. for a
And
while,
interestingly,
effectively.
for a long time, like some of the things that we think of in like big budget movies, like for example, in Lord of the Rings, everyone knows the scene where like they light the beacons of Gondor and that whole thing.
Yeah.
So like that scenario of lighting beacons and seeing it at another beacon, and then that beacon lighting it to a third beacon, and so on and so forth.
That came from them?
That did. There's a series of sea defenses that were put together by the Ottomans and then later copied by the Europeans, where like if you saw a pirate coming to attack your town, you'd light beacons, and it would go all the way to wherever the money was, because that's where the pirates are going.
One by land, two by sea?
Something like that. But there's a name for it too. There is. There's a whole series of these sea defenses that had to be like adopted and invented and revolutionized over time, because this period was so heavily invested in sea battles and specifically in getting into small ports and taking over smaller, and in some cases even larger ports, and just seizing all the money and the people that they could possibly carry back with them to Istanbul.
Istanbul being the capital, yeah?
Yes, Istanbul, the capital.
The capital.
It was Constantinople.
And now it's Istanbul.
Even old New York, even old New York was once New Amsterdam.
Why they change it, I didn't say. People just like
Get better that way.
So Piri Reis.
Our goal is to get you to laugh at least 5 times today. That's our goal for the.
Oh God!
If you can't make it happen, we can't make it happen.
I'll do my best, but my wife says don't laugh because my laugh is particularly annoying. So I trust.
Guess
her on
what?
that.
We're not your wife.
Anyway,
That's a good one.
I think that's a clippable moment.
so the Piri Reis in
We got
general.
them all hot and flustered.
Piri Reis in general was yes, please. Piri Reis in general was as a captain
Say
fairly successful. You're good. Was fairly successful, but as a historical figure who did some really incredible things, he was more successful because, like most historical figures, history doesn't exist without a written record in the same way that it would with a written record. Otherwise, it's anthropology, right? Anthropology, history without written record, basically. Study of man without the writing, culture, other things. So the Piri Reis was able to write himself into history without actually meaning to, by creating a couple of very large, very interesting, very detailed cartographical works. And the first one was more of a work of like, as far as we know, was a work of interest and a work of love, of like learning where things were, and obviously
Geography.
also, well, more than that, 'cause-
Exploration.
Exploration, right? Because he's a sea captain. He likes to know where different things are in the Mediterranean, which is where he would operate.
He was also a naval captain for a while, and then he became an admiral.
Correct.
So he had some practical use to this too, correct?
Yes, and he would have already had, as all admirals and captains and anyone who would run a larger boat would have had a storeroom with a portolan. A portolan is kind of like a book that tells you where you're going more regularly, where all the fresh water is, where all the seizable ports are, where places you could hide from the authorities are. So he would have already had an understanding of how to use these.
I will have a question in a little bit regarding some of the maps.
Sure. So,
But that's a future question, not a now question.
not a now question.
It's a now interruption, a future question.
Got it. So, your reminder to self.
No.
No. When Piri Reis was at some point in the maybe early 1500s, was seizing boats and money and people and doing his piratey goodness, he was accumulating over time maps from both Western European ships, Greek ships, and also to some degree, sometimes also from Muslim ships that had fallen under. And he
kind of just took what he could with maps.
He took all these maps at some point and must have laid them out on a beach and tried to find where everything overlapped and then drawn one map that was based on everything.
You could call it a master map.
Yeah, you could call it a map of the world, which is what it was, right?
Zawardo?
More so because it was so early in time. You have to remember that Magellan had only just recently done anything of note.
Yeah,
Columbus had only been to the New World a couple of times.
Let's put it into perspective. How recent, how obscure a map of the world, a correct, mostly, map of the world.
Mostly, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of overlap where it's
You're
not the best,
talking
but
about, like, they wouldn't have known how wide America was,
this
right?
was still, like, flat Earth type shit.
Yeah, well,
Although
not exactly, right? Because
Just very recently, because Columbus and Magellan proved it as not being. But I'm saying, like, this is still, like, very early proved it. I understand that we're on a disc.
No, so I'll put it this way, right? So you have to go and, like, take it back one step to understand the way maps work with this.
When was Magellan?
It's not just that. It's not just when Magellan was. It's also that the Catholic Church was trying very hard to keep down most things involving learning and flourishing of knowledge, because it makes people easier to control if they don't have the ability to question authority, question knowledge, question religion.
That sounds
And
nothing like the church I know.
not at all, because you have to understand that, like, in the late Roman period, Copernicus already knew the world was round, and there were people who could estimate how far the moon was from the world using shadows and stuff like that. It was really a very.
They were super advanced.
There was a flourishing of understanding of how the world worked, and obviously other people had also been around the world already to some degree, not the whole thing. Vikings, also the Chinese.
Yes.
Yes.
But, like, had been to different places that maybe Columbus could also learn from. In fact, Columbus in general, although I can't prove everything or go through everything all at once, but Columbus in general is a last name from the island where my family is from. I have a cousin whose married name is now not Columbus, but where she comes from, her village called Piri in Chios, Columbus is a common last name. Now, nobody really knows for sure if it's true, but there's a lot of, like,
Speculation that it came from Chios.
not everything, but, like, that he was from the Kingdom of Genoa, right, before he goes to Spain. And Chios was run by the Genoese government at the time when Columbus was alive. There's a lot of things that go into this, but Columbus himself
I ain't
also
saying
learned,
it's a fact, but it's a
Right.
correlation.
There's correlation. There's correlating factors that lead most people to believe that Columbus had, if not.
Well, congratulations to being related to Christopher.
No,
I'll say it early.
I'm not related. I'm from a poor.
I will say it early.
Central.
Thank you for all that your family did.
Yeah, right. Keep me out of this. I don't want any part of massacring Indians. But thank you. But no, thank you. I don't. We don't talk about Columbus. No, nobody does. But
I mean, it is Columbus's fault. We also have hentai, but we'll get to that.
No, leave me out of that one too. But yeah, I have a kid. We're staying out of this one. But the important aspect of Columbus and where he ties into all this anyway is that he would have been born into a situation as a human being where he had access.
He was born a human?
He didn't die a human, but he was born with access to, if he came from Greece, and that region of Greece specifically, access to both Eastern learning and Western learning, and somehow before he was able to go all the way to what was then
The New
not
World.
even understood as being part of the world by the
Caribbeans.
West, he already kind of had a fundamental understanding that there must be something there, and all that would have been only possible if he was already accessing Eastern ideas, right? Because Copernicus was Eastern; he wasn't accepted by the church, and there were other people also. There was a person in Aleppo named Nur al-Din who had a observatory many years after Copernicus, who was also a person who would have been contemporary to Piri Reis, thinking about the round shape of the world and like where things are and the stellar bodies and how they move. But it's all very interesting, but not accessible to the West.
So the only thing that I wanted to bring up with talking about Columbus and Magellan and Copernicus, things like that, and the flat Earth. So I just meant to put it into perspective as a timeline-wise,
Yeah.
like how new of an
Oh,
idea
very
and
new,
how
very new. Yeah.
newly accepted.
So,
I mean, it was
Columbus sails.
it was what,
across the
20
ocean.
years?
Yeah, Columbus sails across the ocean 1490s, right? Comes back 1497, right, or some 1498.
1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue is
Yeah.
usually how they say that.
Well, that's when he
wrong.
went. When he came back, I'm saying. 'Cause
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
He
sorry.
could've
it was
been-
probably mid to late 90s at that point.
right,
But even still,
because he gets
did-
there, you have to think it's several
hits the
months later. He
Caribbeans.
comes
But-
back
Yeah.
whenever.
I'm saying the map that we were talking about was 1513-ish.
1513,
So
it's right.
that's only 20-ish years of like a map to the new world.
Most
type of a
people,
thing.
most people think it's one of the first, if not the first, complete map of the world in general. Anyway, but like he wouldn't have. Piri Reis was not at all these points. It would have been probably if you could visualize a person sitting on a beach, just laying out maps, right, like all over, and seeing where all the borders kind of overlap.
Now,
until
how
it
hard
all
is
makes
that?
Sense. It had to be maddening, but like it was, like any of us who have a hobby that we love are willing to kind of like go the extra mile. This would have been a hobby. This wasn't his job. His job is taking money, taking people,
So
What
running
you're
it
saying
over
is
to the
It-
place.
it was a
like
ins-
tip bashing maps, is what you're saying, kind of, sort of.
He must have been an amateur cartographer, someone who would have liked to go out of his way to find maps in the booty and then not give it to the Sultan, who wouldn't have cared about it anyway.
But-
he just cares about money. and
But
people.
can we also talk a little bit about how maps were even made at this point to have
Maps
something as
were all-
accurate
yeah.
as he ended up being?
Maps were
Because-
largely made on leather or on parchment. Parchment perishes easily at sea, so a lot of the sea maps were made on very thick parchment or leather. And
I didn't even mean that. I just meant the actual like, because there wasn't
Having to sit there
They
and
didn't
plot
have
out how
a-
you draw it and stuff. is what
a
he's, I think,
proper
trying to get to.
compass and the like that type of thing. How insane it is! They did it all by what's the proper term? Where it's like, all right, well, we estimate that we did 20
Yeah.
knots every day
Yep.
for 3 days, and so it must be roughly equivalent to 1,000 miles out. Type nonsense.
Yes,
it's
it was a lot of
insane.
nonsense.
Deadshot, right?
They used a lot of tools that were very attuned and precise, but like actually measuring distance is very difficult. That's part of the reason why. Also, when you look at the early maps in general, most of them are not scaled, right? Like they're not scaled properly because like America is very wide and also very irregular, right? Like
Yeah. It's
like,
we're not a
fucking
block.
funky shaped.
the United States is a block. The continent of North and South America are not a block.
But we are not a block. We are not a
No.
as
So like
as the Americas.
so when you look at the map, like the one I showed you earlier,
I will try and have it.
yes, you will try and I will get it to you. But the map that I showed you
That's more of a
earlier,
challenge for me trying to figure out how to.
Inserted.
They have a picture of where Panama is. You can kind of see how it pinches
song.
and then comes out but like the rest of it doesn't look the way you'd expect the world to look now because they don't exactly know.
Oh, the bee dragon.
Their bee dragon. Yeah, the reason why it's fun to say there be dragon is that on the very early maps that were all hand drawn, Western maps, they believed that the edges of the maps were guarded by spirits that would run you
Sea dragons,
straight to hell if you tried to exceed your borders as a human being.
Flat Earth.
Flat Earth, yeah, but obviously that was all now
Are
changing.
you a flat earther?
I am not a flat earther.
We're disc.
How is it that we're going back to fucking flat Earth?
Man,
How?
So
How?
it's
Baffling concept.
I think what it
It's
kind of is
beyond
now is
baffling.
more just.
denialism.
Birds
it's-
aren't real.
I think
Birds
what
aren't real,
I think
no.
what it is more
Thank
just
you.
a camaraderie thing with them, whereas they want to be the different people to have their own little purposeful like.
No, there's some people who genuinely believe this and wager
they're just
actual
stupid.
money and go, oh yeah, I'll bet you $10,000 that you can't prove that the Earth isn't round.
A man built a
Earth isn't
rocket
flat.
to reprove that there's a horizon.
How?
Yeah,
It's some
I
weird
know.
stuff.
How?
Some
Dude, they
weird
call-
stuff out
it's-
there.
The thing is, like, I think a
You
lot
can see
of
the
them
fucking
don't-
curvature.
A lot of them don't technically believe it. Like I said, like
Well,
I mean,
there's
there are
no
the
proof.
dumb
It's
ones.
big NASA.
The ones who do believe it are like the real stupid ones, but the ones who don't like believe it are just mostly doing it for like a community thing. I think at this
Maybe
point.
they just haven't climbed a mountain high enough.
Well, there ain't no mountain high enough.
Well, there's got to be a mountain high enough somewhere.
Well, I don't know if there's a valley low enough either.
Probably not.
I hate all of you, especially the flat earthers.
Especially the head.
Well, like we say, as we continually say, we are on a disc world on top of elephants, on top of a turtle, flying through space.
The turtle is the important part.
Yes,
Yes,
the turtle
they
is
actually
the important part.
they actually have the important part.
Yeah, they got to hold everything up.
Yes.
So, so the 1513 map that
Hi.
that Piri Reis ends up sketching up from all the other maps was the he writes on it an inscription in his own language
Wait,
on
he
the
made
left
up his
side
own
over
language?
there. No, in Arabic on the left side
okay,
over
okay.
there.
I
Where-
may have photos of this somewhere.
where he's able to kind of elicit a little bit of information about where he gets all the maps from. And he says they came into his hands. Now, what that actually means is he probably took them, but in his hands, he's able to make this kind of map up. And if you look at the map, it's got all icons on it that would have been familiar to sailors. And I'll show you the other map later, the later map. Where it's a book of maps. The icons to sailors indicate things that are very important. Maps are not just like, okay, well, I know England's this way, and I know.
Well, it has to
other
detect
countries are that
mountains,
way.
valleys. It has to detect rivers.
Fresh water, very
inlands,
important.
yeah.
I mean, like you have to remember that these boats are not going fast. They're not going as far as boats do now.
No, I
a
think
lot of
the-
people
the-
think of like sea travel as being a post 1800s thing where you're in like these giant galleons and you could store tons of stuff in the bottom. And it's just
okay, I
it's
see
just
what
it's
was
just
going on
different. It's just different. These ships cannot go very far. They can't go very fast. They have to restock all the time. The fact that Columbus or anyone like Columbus gets as far as he does, as fast as he does, is astounding considering that his boats weren't meant to do that.
So, let's put it into perspective. Let's say maybe 20 knots peak sailing.
Yeah.
Maybe. That's 23 miles an hour. You are going less than a half of the school zones.
Yes, that's correct.
Like,
Yeah.
that is insane. And
It's
that's per
very
hour, and they were traveling thousands. I mean, thousands, potentially.
Of miles, yeah.
I mean, for the Ottomans, they had to go all the fucking way around. But I mean, if-
Well, that's
Yeah.
that's another interesting thing too, is that the Ottomans never actually get to do that as much as
No.
maybe they would have liked to.
but I mean, even just going around South America is
yes,
thousands of
they're
miles.
traveling just traveling from one side of the Mediterranean to the other is almost
Yeah.
impossible. You're talking about a sea that's shallow, that kicks like a bitch all the time. It's good. It's the waves get very tall, very fast, out of nowhere. Storms break very quickly out of nowhere. Like today, we think of things in the Mediterranean as being kind of like irregular, but like who cares? You're on a cruise ship the size of a small building, right? Like it's enormous.
You should talk to your doctor about irregularities.
Yeah, right. But you know, when you're on these giant cruise ships, when the sea is kicking, it doesn't kick the same way as when you're on these tiny little sloops and like smaller boats. Not nearly as badly.
Get on your sloop, John B.
Wait, their boats are called sloops?
There are a bunch of types of boats.
Like these.
Yeah, there's a bunch. The most common boat.
He's gonna have to send me all this.
I
shit.
will.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, this is to me in the future.
He's going to try and figure out how to put it on the TV in the background, too.
I won't.
But the most common boats were actually
I
called
won't do it.
dhows. I don't know if I have a photo. Oh, there it is.
Good
Called
source.
Did you pay the Dow?
So they're called dhows, DHOW, I think it's the way it's spelled. But they would carry goods like around locally. But if you went out into the open Mediterranean in this, you'd just get killed, right?
I don't think that would survive open ocean.
No. So like most people would use like these things that look like triremes with sails. They were a little bit bigger, more durable. And then the Europeans started to use things called bastarda. Bastarda are these like hybrid, kind of like. They're
I hope
not
you like
quite
getting covered by
galleons.
photos.
Yeah,
You're
right.
gonna get covered by
So,
photos.
like, the galleons are the big ones, right?
Yeah, the galleons are the big ones that they use like in the Pirates of the Caribbean. That's like the ones with the cannons, rows of cannons,
What
giant
Gokaiger
sails.
uses, yes.
Yeah.
That is the Black Pearl.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's
Wait,
yeah,
the Black
that's-
Pearl's a
that's-
galleon class ship?
Maybe not the Black Pearl, like the one that the British were using in the beginning of the movie, that big ship that he then steals.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that's
okay,
a galleon.
okay.
They're huge. They're warships, and they're also cargo ships, and they're everything in between.
They also sometimes become giant robots.
Yeah. So,
Super Sentai.
yeah, right. So this map that I'm gonna send to you for sure is got the picture of where the most of the piracy was done in the early part of the Ottoman Empire. It gives you an idea of what the world expands from and then goes to. This is the world, to give you like a real understanding of this. This is the world that Piri Reis was in. That was his world. And the fact that he had a world map that was the whole world is even more incredible, because his world would have been a triangle that would have started somewhere around the northern part of the Aegean, go down to like Crete, go
So-
over to the Holy Lands and back up. Like that's it.
So I'm looking
Let's-
at it here, the way it's laid out, like kind of, and it's actually fascinating how it kind of lays itself out once you figure out
Yeah.
what you're looking. Once you
You're
figure
gonna
out what
send
you're
me that
looking
too.
at.
Yeah. You're gonna
This?
send me that.
This is from
Yeah.
Wikipedia.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
gonna send me that, right?
Yeah, all right. I'll
Yeah, you're gonna send me that.
screenshot it to you. Yes.
Yeah, it is a very interesting thing, because like you look at it and you realize
And then here's a bit more complete one. Just
I was gonna say.
you look at it and you realize that he's got the basic idea of what it should be, but not the sizes, because he can't possibly know the sizes. This is a time when,
No,
like I
it
said,
does-
Magellan's done one trip.
I was gonna say that it was also only speculated at the time because of the North Pole
Yes.
that we had a South Pole.
That we
in
had a South
Antarctica.
Pole. Yes.
It was never technically confirmed until the 1700s.
You could kind of
Yeah.
see it
He
though
was-
here, which is interesting.
I think they knew, because didn't Magellan go around the Cape of Good Hope, right? That was Magellan.
Yes, but he never actually touched anything, so he never technically
he
saw
never
anything.
saw the South Pole. Yeah. So,
So-
for all they knew, it could just be water.
Yeah.
Yeah. 'cause
So
I
they
think that's supposed to be some of Antarctica's coast right here.
Yes. So they
Yeah.
the thing about the 1513 map is that it also shows a non-ice
disc, yeah.
a disc, a non-ice, a dry land base around the coast.
Yeah.
Which was about 2,000 years ago, is what most people speculate. So that's kind of like a silly thing as well.
I don't think that's entirely. I think that's interpretive. You remember, he wouldn't have been there.
Of
This-
course.
This is just going on notes and journals and other maps.
Of course, I think that he would, but their argument is that the way that this is different sources that I've heard, different podcasts, which I may put there, I may not. It depends. Let's see how lazy I am.
Name check.
Yeah. So they end up having it. Shown as though the actual 1513 map was so accurate and so like close to being what actually it is.
Mm-hmm.
I have it here, right here,
That
kind of
Yeah.
labeled.
Yes.
that Africa is basically spot on.
Yeah.
South
Africa,
America,
they already knew.
Africa is very close looking from it.
Yeah.
South America,
South America was
there's some
close
lumps and
enough.
bumps that aren't technically there.
because
South America, including the mountains and the rivers and everything, was close enough at that point that
they
it's
don't know where the other side of it is. That's why.
yeah
Right.
was close enough at that point
And
that
if you look closely, like Antarctica connects to South Africa here.
Right, because they don't know.
But they didn't know
They
that.
didn't know that. Yeah, but
Again, this was a extremely new thing.
Yes.
Christopher Columbus had only discovered the New World about 20 years prior.
That's right.
And
this is
so
all
the
radically
Ottomans-
new. Radically new.
Yeah, the Ottomans had never even been to America at this point.
You have to take an even bigger frame than that because the Ottomans also were not the creators of most of this knowledge. They were just purveyors of it, and they also enjoyed learning. Which
Yeah,
is,
they did
which
it
is-
best.
Like it's one of these things where like a lot of people, especially later historians, like between say like the 1700s and then maybe like the 1900s, especially people who like to play like Monday morning quarterbacking after the Ottoman Empire collapses. Look at them like,
armchair generals?
look at them like brutes, but they're really just like incredibly interested in learning about both military things and also artistic things and also scientific things, because they themselves are a provincial people, which I understand and love because my own family is very provincial and I love everything about my family and everything about the world from which my own family comes, but like you have to at some point accept that there's things you don't know and then be willing to learn about them, which what the Ottomans did was at the beginning of their history as a civilization and as an empire, they were very interested in learning. They were okay not knowing. They were okay using knowledge
They
from
understood-
wherever it would come. At the
They-
end of their empire, part of the reason why they collapsed in the 1900s is that they ceased to do that.
They understood that it took time to understand things.
Yeah, which is like kind of like it sounds like a truism, but it's really not. It's a conscious choice to either accept or reject that you don't know everything, or that to insist that you do. Right.
And people fail to forget that the Ottoman Empire did technically exist until the early
1900s,
1900s.
yeah.
That's correct. Until after World War
Not
I.
technically.
It did.
Did.
Yeah,
it
did.
The Greek
The Chicago Cubs, famous quote.
The Greek kingdom of 1827 was only a small piece of.
It was a blip. It was a blip.
It was a small piece. It was like this piece of what had existed under the Ottomans, but the Ottoman Empire had already shrunk by that point. At the point we're talking about, the Ottoman Empire is absolutely phenomenally huge.
Well, at that point, a lot of colonialism
I'll have a
had kind of
photo.
been partially reversed from like. I mean, colonialism
I
itself
won't
had
have
been.
it. I won't figure out what's what.
Like this is the empire under the predecessors to the Ottomans, and I used to do this in my classes because I thought it was kind of fun. But
classes?
I had those, yeah.
What were you, a teacher?
Yeah, I was a professor.
Ha!
Yeah, I goofed. But the Ottoman Empire was big, and then like it gets to be so big to the point of absurdity, where it's enormous. Right? This is just the Arab empires
Wait, so
going
what were
up
you
to the
professor
point where
of?
Charles Martel was able to stop them.
The Charles Motel?
Charles Martel.
Motel,
Him. And then
Charles Motel.
this is just under the Ottomans, right, in 1566, and then it gets bigger than that, which is insane. So,
And again, this is basically, I don't want to say all of the world, but I mean, this is basically all of the developing world, because there were still Native Americans and things like that, but it was...
this is the whole scenario of what it means to be a learning Western person at the time, because I consider the Ottoman Empire to be part of the West. If you get like really technical about it, if you're talking about the East versus the West, or like all that, yeah, sure, the Ottoman Empire is the East, but like there's a whole group of like well-learned people further east than that too, some of whom had been founded by Arab conquerors going way back before the Ottomans in India and whatnot, some of which were natively Indian from the Indian subcontinent, and then there's also people in China and Japan all doing cool things at the same time.
So-
And in fact, when European explorers get all the way to China, finally, when they finally get there, they are amazed to find Greeks, Jews, Arabs, all already there.
Oh,
I just want to
hell,
state
there's
that
the Vikings have like Chinese and Arab artifacts like in their burial mounds and shit. And there's Viking artifacts going into like China and Arab and Arabia and stuff. So
And
yeah,
then,
these
then
people
there's
are all
this,
over
and
the
then there's
place.
the Silk Road that existed also this whole time. Like everyone knows where China
didn't
is,
have the
except
internet back then.
Right. Everyone.
I
knows-
got 'em.
you got me. But the Silk Road exists, and like people had already known to some degree through a relay race where China was from a much earlier time than the Europeans did. In fact, Columbus gets the idea of going to look for the Orient, as he calls it, way back then, based in part on wanting to undercut the Ottoman trade, right? Like that was the point.
Yeah,
the point is everything costs too
historical
much.
hentai pipeline.
Yeah.
Please stop.
No.
I just wanted to point out though that like things like gunpowder were just coming about. Things like
Yeah.
bows and arrows were still the prevalent weapon. Things like spears, swords.
Yeah, the first
But, like-
cannon users were the Ottomans taking Constantinople back in the
Yeah,
day.
and that was what year?
30, 40 years earlier.
Exactly. So
Yeah,
it
this
wasn't
was-
as though things like combustion engines were around. They
No.
weren't. It was strictly sails. It was bows and arrows. It was so
Rowing, hand
in-
power.
This is called the age of discovery for a reason, right?
Yeah.
Like that's what people call it. Like who are much bigger brained than I am. They've coined
He
phrases
means
like
me.
they've coined phrases like the gunpowder empires or the age of discovery. Like this is the era that we're going into when you're talking about this type of thing. You're going from an era where it's the high Middle Ages and like the 1300s and 1200s, and like everything changes for the next 200 years.
Yeah.
Exploration and war are probably the two most like biggest factors in terms of technological expansion when it comes to human innovation.
Well, it's
Oh
not
no,
just,
for sure. No,
it's
go
not
with
just
that.
it's,
Yeah.
it's not just technological though. Is what I was going to
Oh,
say.
in terms of like everything else too.
It also creates.
Look at what happened
an
with
avenue.
World War One, World War Two.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean,
Light years. Yeah, the amount that technology jumped during World War II was phenomenal.
well, World War One as well.
World War I
because
as
we
well,
actually
just
ended
fighting
up
in
going
airplanes.
From, we went from just being able to
The invention of
fly
radio
maybe a
and
little
stuff.
bit.
Yeah,
The
it's
invention
great.
of the radio.
Yeah.
Trench war.
My
not
my
so much trench
grandfather fought in the Balkan Wars between 1911 and 1913. Part of the reason why my family gets to America, yes, there's a lot of years between me and my grandfather.
warfare. So you are old.
My grandfather was the immigrant who came to America.
Ignored.
My grandfather was the immigrant who came to America in the first place. He came over as a kid to avoid what would be then eventually called World War One, and went back, got a wife, came back to America. My father was born. His father was like 47,
Gotcha.
and when I was born, my father was 43. I want to say. So there's that. If you do the math on that, there's a lot of years between when my grandfather was born.
So you're
I think, in the
80s, got it.
1800s. My grandfather was born in the 1800s. I think it would have been something like that, right?
To be
That's
fair,
why math
our
works.
grandmother was born in
1922.
yeah.
Yeah, that's my mom is born. I won't talk about my mom. We don't talk about women's ages. My dad was born in 19. Oh my God, I can't even do math anymore. 39? No.
Our grandmother is older than yours.
No, that's my
Golly.
dad. That's not my grandfather. That's my dad.
Oh, never mind.
1929.
No, 30s.
1939.
30s.
Yeah,
I
alright.
think so. Some of that.
Our dad was 64.
Yeah, you just do math. It's a lot of years when you have like an immigrant family where it's. I mean, that's a whole other discussion.
Well,
for another
our
time, but
family
that's the way it works.
generationally goes back pretty far. On both sides, surprisingly, go back pretty far in America.
Yeah.
Our a lot of our main mother's family, because our mother's family is a Jewish descent. There is a
So-
chunk of it in Europe, but the good chunk that ours descended directly from is from America, generally actually going back for a while.
Yeah, so they fled the Spanish Inquisition into Turkey, and then from Turkey into America.
Oh, that's neat. That's actually a really interesting point in history too. I actually really enjoy. I mean, it's not fun.
Nobody
it's
expects the
painful.
Spanish Inquisition.
But yeah, but it's a super interesting time period. It's part of the scenario that explains why certain
What a show.
certain groups of Jewish people either love or dislike the country that they end up in. You know, like I have friends who are of Jewish descent who are from Central Europe, Greece, that type of thing, where they were sheltered and helped. And then there's places where they were just like run out on rails, which is unfortunately where some of it ends up coming out to. So
It's
that's the way it works.
Anti-Semitism's a bitch.
Anti-Semitism's real. I mean, and it is interesting. Like my own family went. Well, it's digressing, but like. We have a whole branch.
We are A-okay to stumble.
We have a whole branch that came into.
Maybe you'll get a shirt.
Came into.
Year two?
Came into employ in Alexandria in the 30s and 40s before Nasser, like maybe 20s and 30s.
Before Nasser?
Nasser. Nasser was a leader in Egypt during the 1920s and 30s. And I had a whole branch that was working there before the nationalization of everything in the later years after World War II, and then had to go to Canada because of quotas and all that. So, I mean, it is what it is.
Canadian quotas, you say?
No, American quotas. That's why they didn't come to America, to the United States of America.
Okay,
they ended up in Canada as a result of the quotas that we had.
I
mean, Greeks weren't interesting. We were not interesting people to the United States government pre and post World War II.
Yeah.
Why
would you be?
Why would we be? What do we even do?
Olive oil?
Olive oil, wine, spirits. I don't know.
Metaxa?
Furriers.
Metaxa? Metaxa? How'd you pronounce it?
Metaxa.
Metaxa.
Metaxa is how you pronounce it.
Metaxa.
If you want to sound good in Greek, it's metaxa.
Metaxa.
When Piri Reis does his first map, it's not exactly a fluke. He must have had a very deep understanding of the way in which he was going to assemble it, what it was going to be doing, and how it would be received. And I don't think it was received quite the way he expected, because he brought it to court as a gift for the Sultan at the time, and I don't think the Sultan really gave a damn, according to most historical record.
And that was Suleiman, right?
Yeah, that's right. And
Suleiman the First?
No, it was
pre-Suleiman, right?
It was pre-Suleiman. It was I don't know if I have exactly which. It would be 15. Who was? Do I even have who it was in 15?
Well, there was Suleiman the Great, who ended up having
that should be
the second map,
yes.
the second book,
the second one. So when he gives him the first one, if I understand it correctly, it was tossed into a treasure room in Topkapi Palace and never really received quite the way he would have liked. And we only have about a third of it at this point left in the historical record anyway. It's really the second.
Is that from like physical degradation over the years?
I think it was just, and they only kept the part they didn't know, which is interesting. Or they threw out the part they didn't know. We'll never know, right?
It also wasn't really uncovered until what, 1920 something?
Yeah. It was a long time later. It was an afterthought.
So
to
it
a
was
lot of people.
400-ish plus years.
Yeah.
I mean, we're finding historical artifacts all the time, all over the place. So
don't talk about the Vatican, right? Isn't there are there whole movies and things about that, right?
Dude, there's Japanese temples with like shit that we've never even seen before.
Sure. And there's buried like the terracotta soldiers that were found by accident, weren't they?
Yeah, the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Dead Sea Scrolls, sure.
Shit's all over.
There it is.
We're still looking for.
We don't talk about none of that
the
there.
tomb of Genghis Khan, I think, is still missing.
We don't talk about them there.
Although, do we want to find that because of the River of Mercury, supposedly, I think, with it? Is that what the...
I think everyone wants to find something.
I just want us to find the library of Alexandria.
The one that burnt down because the Catholic Church didn't like it? But so...
I want us to get any remains we can.
Yeah.
It's because it had all the evidence in that library. That's why.
What did you say, guest audience?
Said because it has all the evidence.
Yeah.
The Catholic Church has been doing shit for years.
I mean, it's more than that. I think I couldn't tell you why anyone's motivation are what they are, but like, there's whole books of religious understanding that are not accepted by either. I mean, I'm Greek, but aren't even accepted by my church. But forget about the Catholic Church, right? Like, they're not accepted because they just come after the Bible was already accepted as written. So, but so
That's
Piri,
like the agnostic stuff. Is
yeah,
there.
yeah. So Piri comes into this world now where he made the one map, he makes a second map, and then he makes a book of maps. Later years, obviously, he would have been older for the time period because he's born in the late 1400s, and he makes the second map. It's the 1520s, and the book of maps, and the book
What's
of maps.
that name?
The Kitab Ibahriya. It means the book of
One
the
more
sea.
time?
No, don't make me say it again.
Please?
But no, my accent in Turkish is awful.
What if I said please again?
Kitab Ibahriya.
Did it?
But
I hate being asked three things.
I probably said it horribly wrong, and I apologize to anyone who could say it better than me. But
Meaning anyone not one of us two sitting here.
But,
or guest audience.
okay. But
Kitab Abakbir.
but
We're going to get shot.
I'm gonna be in so much trouble. But the
okay.
the
Nobody
Katabi
watches
was with the
Like,
book
share,
was written up to be a guidebook to people who would be pillaging and sailing the seas that he did know best, which is the Mediterranean. And the interesting thing about the book is that it's annotated, and it's also got.
You have a copy of that, correct?
I do. It's
Over there.
over there. If you want to pass it to me, I could do the thing.
Do the thing.
You're not him. Because he has a thing.
I do have a thing.
That's a very fancy book.
It's a handmade copy. I got it. If you could actually look at it if you want to.
Oh wow, that's
Oh, yeah. He has an extremely fancy version. This is like
container.
I don't want to say this is a passion project for him because this was a passion project for Piri,
You look at it.
but this is an extremely
Wow,
cool
these are,
thing for
like-
you.
It's real. Yeah. So
Well, it's all handmade to appear as though it's
as though it's
authentic.
original. It's not the original. It's just it
Oh,
just looks
I mean-
original. Yeah.
It is very much worn parchment
Yeah. Super
from
cool.
similar styles of what was back in
And
the day.
I'll be happy
Yeah,
to
it's really
give
cool.
you some photos of. what
I'll
I
have some
can.
photos here, maybe, maybe here,
maybe
and
here.
also maybe here. Who knows?
But the interesting thing about the way the map is just drawn up is that if you look at it, it's got annotation and also icons that show what you're looking at, so that anyone who's a novice Corsair or Ghazi, if you're from the Turkish descent of it, would understand how to navigate the shoals, how to navigate the sea line of different islands. And part of the most fun part of it, of understanding maps, is that how their oriented changes. The word oriented obviously comes from the word orient, meaning to the east, but not everyone does it the same way. We think of things as all centering around Europe. They didn't think that way. They thought of things as centering around Jerusalem.
So I personally
or
tend to
around
think of
Mecca, and
Yeah,
back then. And the case of the Arab and Muslim explorers and sailors, it would have been Mecca. In the case of some others, it would be Jerusalem. But as a result, like if you look at
That
some
is
of the
why
maps,
I brought-
it changes.
That is why I brought up. For us, the Western world would be like Japan, China, things like that, Korea.
Mm-hmm.
But for them, it was Europe. Because it was all based off of where they wanted to center their map.
That's right. And for them, their map would be centered around their cultural and ancestral homeland, which for them is not Europe, right? Not in any way. Not in their own minds, right?
So are
Because
you
they
telling
harken-
me that the map isn't centered around America?
Which? Oh, the original map? The original map is not centered around America. It's centered right around Africa, right? Because that would be the center panel.
Probably.
Yeah.
But I mean, the map that we're all given these days is centered around America.
No, it's
nuts.
awful.
Yeah.
It's awful. But like, if you look at this, this one particular still that I will definitely get you is interesting. Not only because it's the island where my family's from, but because of the way it's oriented. This would be that way if we were looking at it in a
Rotated 180-ish,
If
90
if
degrees.
we were looking at it in a current map, this island that's north,
Huh, okay.
right? This is Turkey.
So let's see
That's
if I
north.
can. Let's see. This will be a challenge to me because I'll be listening to this in the future. Let's see if I can edit it so this way it's rotated 90 degrees now.
And it's fun. It's fun to do this kind of like mental gymnastics on why things are the way they are, but it also gives you an opportunity to show how like this is the only town that would have mattered at the time.
The answer is probably no. To me.
To a lot of people who were sailing the ocean, because this was the deep water port, right? This one right there. And then it has notes where the most rich and easiest to access pillage zones would have been, and then it also has notes where the different rivers are, and also notes that say that some of the rivers are only there during certain months of the year.
So, again, I have a question.
Sure.
This is all still during that term of where they had basically fly by the seat of your pants mapping, right? Like it was.
This
all,
would have. This is
what was
so
the correct term?
much-
Do we have a statistician? Do we have a fact checker? What's that term that we're looking for?
Cartography?
No. For developing maps, because it was basically like, oh yes, I averaged 20 miles an hour a day, or 20 knots an hour a day for 60 days. So that means that I'm 180
many
or
miles,
1,800 miles away.
That's distance measuring. We're measuring distance.
But they had a fancy term for it.
Sure, figure it out.
Yeah, that's your point.
They could only use at that point certain ways of orienting using the stars. They had stellar cartography.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they had a way to use that the way the sky would move at certain months of the year that would tell you where you were going and how much distance had been covered. It's really, really very ornate and it's fascinating. It really is.
It looks like we had a hand raise.
You talking about the Protollan chart?
No, the Protollan chart is what I'm talking about right now, yeah.
Oh my fucking god, my fault.
I was talking about, I think it's like Deadeye navigating or something like that, where they basically ended up guessing, very educated for
Yeah.
what they could
Yes.
at the time, the exact distance.
Yeah.
What's up?
No, I fucked up. Never mind.
Never mind, not minding. So interestingly, I have a little bit of it right here actually. So the interesting thing about it is that the Protollan charts up to this point, and many of them during this point, including this one, were largely done using stellar navigation. But that room lines on newer chart, I think that's what you're looking for, is a way of depicting possible courses, and using room lines. You could also do estimating distances.
So is there like star charts in this?
No, this one's just land charts. But you'd use if you found a chart that had a map of a place you'd know. Like some of this doesn't look like much because these are literally maps of North Africa, right? You'd have to look at the key, but like some of them that have like that's Crete, right? Because you see Crete, it looks like Crete.
Yeah.
So like you'd have to orient using the key, and then you'd be able to tell during certain months of the year which way you were going using your sextant and star charts.
He said sextant.
I did.
But
say
he didn't
sextant.
actually have any in his.
No. These are tools that every sea captain needed to have, or you'd just die. Right?
Oh,
Like, how
okay.
do you
I
get
was like-
anywhere? How do you get
I didn't know if
anywhere?
there was
How do you
gonna
get
be-
anywhere without a compass and a sextant?
I don't know if there's like any fancy star charts in this
Guesstimate.
itself here.
Oh no, I don't.
Guesstimate.
Guestimation.
Well, I mean, somebody couldn't be awake at all points in time saying, yes, we are traveling 20 knots an hour based off of this.
I mean, somebody's got to watch out for the underwater vampires.
I think one of the coolest things about
Sure, but that wasn't like the dedicated map guy.
Yeah,
the dedicated
yeah.
cartographer is what I'm saying.
I think one of the most interesting things about Piri
do
Reis
two
in
jobs.
general is that just nobody in his culture had ever been driven to do what he did, right? Like, even in general, very few people were.
Well-
At the time this was made,
How-
there were
how old was-
180 total Portolans in the world.
How old was Magellan at this point?
I don't know when he was born. Sorry, that's not something I know.
Well, I mean, like how
Magellan's
long
age,
ago?
birth.
When did Magellan sail around the world?
Very early 1500s, late 14 to 1500s. Yeah,
And that's-
the big voyage was in the early 1500s.
Yeah.
Exactly, 1519 was Magellan.
Right, and
that was-
the total map together was made in 1520s. So
Well-
you're talking about days.
So
Yeah. In fact,
Like, it's
the original map was
effectively-
done before he completed his whole journey.
Exactly. Like, it's effectively showcasing the fact that nobody knew what the world looked like. It was
No.
based off of what
Hearsay.
God or the church or your emperor said at this point in time.
Yeah.
So it was all kind of-
Magellans are like the Horn of Magellan around South America or whatever that is.
That's why it looks joined in that one, because there's no complete map of the world yet. You have to remember, even Magellan, when he comes back, is still working on like sketches and like ideas and notes.
It was all that Deadeye that I'm talking about. That
All
nobody
that
knows the
Deadeye
name of.
thing, yeah.
Deadeye Navigator.
Infinite possibilities. But so the
Are you having fun? I hope you're having fun.
I'm having fun. You having fun?
I'm having fun.
This is
I hope you're enjoying it.
I am. I love talking about stuff that I don't get to talk about, being a boring human being normally.
That's why we have this podcast, because we're boring people.
There,
Yes.
well, aren't we all?
here to
But so the
Yar har fiddly-dee. Do what you want, because a pirate is free. Almost Magellan.
Are you Magellan?
magical Christmas land. All right, so
How many times have we made him laugh? Are you
I'm
keeping
Magellan.
count?
I think that's 3, maybe.
Here's the count, right? Here. Reference to the reference counter.
Hey!
Hey!
Is this like a knockdown meter? Like there's official knockdowns and there's like maybe knockdowns.
It's
So the
just
reference to
kind
the reference counter is a reference that will never be brought up.
Oh, got it.
It's a reoccurring bit of ours,
I
just
see.
like the sensor bar and stuff.
I see. Got it.
Yeah.
Ah,
Our sensor bar.
I see. There's certain things we just don't do. We don't talk about Bruno and sponsorships.
Eventually, we're going to do like a big short.
Well, I
or
mean,
whatever.
if we do somehow end up getting sponsored, here's your chance now.
right? Sponsor them.
Then we will actually have to talk about sponsor. However, it is, for all legal purposes, illegal to say that we are sponsored by a company that doesn't actually sponsor us.
So if like we bring out like a can of Arizona for say, we're not sponsored, but we're just
They're
So,
cool
but you
guys.
wouldn't mind, but you
They're
wouldn't
cool
mind.
guys. Arizona is pretty cool.
That's really hot, I thought.
Well, I meant for the fact that they still have their 99-cent cans. Here in
Kinda.
insert state now.
no, that's just regular drink.
So
We're talking about maps.
we're talking about maps.
We still maps.
One bad mama.
Ooh.
So the period, like I said, the period that this was done in, it was so unlikely that you'd find a complete map of anything, and the amount of actual books that were issued.
It was
were
nerve-wracking.
sub 200, and
It's-
the amount of map makers there were even smaller because many of them would have made more than one.
We should
Somebody-
call this the history of maps and the thing and get all the confused hate clicks.
So somebody had actually put in,
got the joke.
again, somebody put in a group, in a podcast, that like the actual amount of maps that he had to study in order to come up with
Would
his
have been
world map
insane.
was, because they were all different languages, they
Yeah.
were all different time periods, they all used different keys.
Like I said,
because
it's literally kit bashing.
because there's different keys to represent different rivers,
Yeah.
different islands,
Yep.
different mountains, different
Yes.
this and that. And this was all 1500s, before we had access to the internet, before we had access to satellite, before we had,
Telephones, nothing.
Drones.
like
A
it's
drone would have been pretty helpful for this, wouldn't it?
it's
Right?
Just taking a picture of all the maps from a drone would have been useful. Like, how do you
The-
do you even sketch? Like,
that's what I'm saying.
you would have
Like,
had
the
to be
man,
on a hill overlooking the beach and sketching.
and
Pretty
he
crazy.
probably had to take all of the maps that had similar lines
That's
and
right.
went, yes, this is close to each other, so these 30 of the 90 maps that we're looking at
Yeah.
are the most close to each other, so therefore we are going to have these 30 maps represent the coastline of insert country X.
Yep.
And, he
it's
went
not
down
always- it's not
the
intuitive.
line.
That's right.
It's
It's non-intuitive, and like I was saying, like if you look at this is a map of Chios, and it's different than the other one I showed you because one was done by Piri Reis, who's Turkish, another one was done by a map maker who is Arabic, and like it changes everything but the orientation
Exactly.
of the maps, and like you said, the key, everything changes based on who makes it, what they're
where they're centered,
whether-
how
right.
in
There's
detailed
no-
they want to go.
There's no
It's-
standardization. And the fact that he makes the map gets more and more incredible the more
they were
things
saying
you throw out there that make it harder and harder to do it.
They were saying that in order to actually figure that out during that time period, you probably had to spend 20-ish years just going through different languages, different maps, different.
You're talking about a guy who was not educated.
So this is
not
80
formally, and would have only spoken Turkish and maybe Arabic.
When did he die? How old was he? 80 years old? 81?
Old enough. He died pretty old. He did not die.
And this is 1500s, 80s, 81.
I don't think he's not a young man when he dies.
I just want to point out historically, this whole people only live to be 30 thing around the time. That's
based on also infant mortality.
Yeah, that's offset by a weird infant mortality average that knocks it down.
Weird infant mortality?
Completely believable infant mortality?
Yeah, no. So, say if everybody's dying at 80, and then everybody's also dying at, 1, and you average that out, it becomes somewhere in the 30s, and that's where
or not even 1.
Yeah, so...
Yeah. Well, the not even 1 part doesn't register, I don't think. Well, not at birth, but if it's
technically
after,
it does.
If it's after birth.
Actually, no. At birth, in a lot of Asian cultures, they consider babies born as 1 year old.
Yeah, well, Greeks too. We count 1 year old being the year you're born.
Yeah,
well, traditionally.
So yeah, I guess that would kind of count Sinusorta there. 8.
Sinusorta.
You are technically correct. The best kind of correct.
The best kind of correct.
The best kind of correct.
Yep.
Insert image here.
They just did the best quote of that on Futurama subreddit. So I just read that. You're technically correct. The best kind of correct.
Welcome. We have input from the audience.
Welcome.
Wow, a weird convergent timeline thing there. Good for you.
So he puts together the book, and the book ends up being a backbone of the Kitabi Bahriya.
This thing.
That's this thing. Feel free to try to say it. You just got to get a in the middle.
Kitabi
Bahriya.
Yeah, got to get a good.
Kitabi Bahriya.
It makes it easier to navigate the sea lanes in a way that.
But this was the one that wasn't even accepted though, right?
No, none of them were really considered as good as they could have been. Because it's a matter of what do you value, right? Earlier sultans would have valued certain forms of learning more than others and certain forms of science more than others. If we're being totally honest, if it's something so foreign and different to their sense of worth, there's no frame, right? There's no framing. It's like someone telling you they had a map of Mars, and it's like, all right, sure, you have a map of Mars. When am I going to Mars that I care about Mars? Right.
I think Elon Musk cares.
Elon Musk put a car on Mars, didn't he? He will.
He hit a body there. Yes. He put a body in a Tesla and shot it into space. Yes.
Some of that.
He claims it was a crash test dummy in his Tesla, but we all know
it was Bob.
It was somebody he didn't like.
Keen a bitch.
So the book was put together and assembled and left to be to history as basically his contribution, and then he dies in obscurity, having not really maybe realized what he possibly hoped would have happened, based on his work, because his goal, I think, probably, I mean, I'm not there, but his goal probably was to open up the eyes of the Ottomans to how they're falling behind in a sea race. Because we all talk about all these races. There's races to technology, there's races to money, there's races the
nuclear arms race,
space.
Sure, space race. There's all these races in human history, and we don't know we're losing them until we lose them, unfortunately. But
or we win,
or we win them, and then someone else loses. Right, like the Cold War, right? Like the Cold War was not obviously won until it was won, and even then it wasn't completely won, right? So,
I mean, the last couple of years we knew we were kind of winning there.
Did we? My father worked for Grumman, right? And
I was talking space race.
Well, I was
atomic arms race.
When I was growing up, which was a Tuesday, but when I was growing up, which was in say the
can't prove the world wasn't made last Tuesday.
Mid 1980s. My father was really worried at all times of nuclear war. right? Like really worried because he worked for the government. He worked for the defense industry. He was a developer not only of the lunar module but also of the F-14s, right? So like,
That's cool.
It is pretty cool. He's gonna go down in history as a much more important person than me, and I'm okay with that.
But Grandpa was also more important than us.
Shout out to Dad. But when he was doing all this stuff, he was always worried that something would go horribly wrong because towards the end of a conflict is the most temperamental, explosive possibly part of a conflict because someone's winning and someone's losing, and the person who's losing knows he's losing by then.
Yeah.
Right. So like that's when you get things that go horribly wrong. So like the fact that the Cold War ended with a whimper and not a bang is kind of a testament to the.
It's almost historically anonymous.
An anomaly.
An anomaly.
Yes, that's the word I was looking for.
An
there.
enema.
But it's a good thing, right?
I can say this right, but I can't say that word right.
But it's like
Yeah.
right. It's like the anemone in the what movie is that with
Enema?
Nebo?
Yeah, whatever. But it is what it is. It's very very unlikely that it would have ended as peacefully as it did, even as not peacefully as it was.
Yeah, I get it. It's just kind of
So it's interesting too, and like the way that the years go after this book is made and after Piri Reis dies, no one ever really picks up and tries to do what he did again, ever, in the same way. And then the next person who comes up with like a really divergent kind of like cool scientific thing is the guy I mentioned, Nur al-Din, who does stellar cartography in Aleppo, which is in Syria. And like this is not something that you need to go diving into.
Nope, too late.
Nope, done. So this whole thing
by
is
all means, please stumble.
yeah, right. So like but he gets it's 60 or 70 years later, and like when he does his thing, it's even more looked down upon than even Piri Reis. Piri Reis was like, oh, nice puppy, like that's cool. Go keep pillaging, right? Like it wasn't his purview to do this.
You have your hobby.
You have your hobby. It's cool. Thank you. I'll stick this in my treasure vault. But
We're gonna put this right here on the very important fridge.
the very important fridge. Exactly.
I wrote a song about an octopus.
Wow, that's so cool there, Ringo. Let's put it on the fridge. This very important fridge where we put all of our very important dates and our very important songs.
Sorry.
Hey, I got him!
But that's basically the way it was, right? Like it was put up on the shelf with mom's fine china.
Look at this macaroni drawing. It's very nice.
So
We will break him.
You will not. But it is what it is. He got a trophy. He went back to do his thing, and
Participation.
and then after it's done, right? Like it does exist. It's cool. It's a part of the historical record. But unlike what happens in the European theater, in the Ottoman theater, over the next successive, let's say, 100 years or so, they start to fall behind in the sea race, in the sea battle, right? Like the ships aren't as important, they aren't as powerful, they aren't able to keep up in the way they do over land. And
Jackson knows all about the importance of of a good navy.
Hoorah! And as a result of their losing in the naval theater in general, I think that also kind of puts the emphasis on the Portolan and on the world map and just kind of shoves it under the table more, because like now you're talking about a situation where if they're not winning and they're losing and it's not an important piece of their victory, why would they even need it anymore? You know what I'm saying? Like historically it becomes less and less important over time. And then obviously over the next, say, like maybe 1650 to 1750, then the Ottoman Empire starts to recede in general.
They were no longer the dominant.
The dominant preeminent force in the early modern world. Now you're talking about Spain is the up and coming force. Holland is an up and coming force. England is an up and coming force, right?
Do not underestimate the
France.
power of tulips.
France.
Yeah, France. I mean, well, yeah, France.
Wine
The
and baguettes.
windmill. The windmill Gundam.
The best Gundam.
So
Shout out to our Gundam episode.
and then
Which one?
Yes.
Yes, I see. So then over time, this whole thing ends up being forgotten. And then, as you said, it was found later in the 1900s, and it was almost too big to be completely understood. How important the import of the actual historical artifact to me, as a person who studied it and is interested in it.
Yeah, from what I understand, the guy that actually found it was like, what the actual fuck am I looking at?
Yeah,
and then he
basically.
gave it to somebody who was a specialist in Arabic and was like,
Oh yeah, this is the actual fuck. Right.
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
This man did what now?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Oh shit! This is neat. Look at this.
And that
Great.
the actual importance isn't just that it exists. It's that it's a sign of something that could have been that wasn't, and it was a choice, right? Like it was a choice on the part of the Sultan, who would have been maybe more educated
Which
than a lot
Sultan?
of other Suleiman, who would have been more educated than most people.
Suleiman the first, Suleiman the second, Suleiman the third.
So magnificent.
Ah,
But like
the greatest.
But he would have, whoever the sultans were that follow, right? All the sultans that follow who would have had possession of this, all would have had the opportunity to use it to their advantage. To me personally, I've always been interested in why they didn't use the Red Sea or open up a sea crossing in the way the British do later. Like none of this ever made sense to me. They always had the opportunity to use the sea more. But the Ottomans felt like their real strength was over land, and they never really pushed or experimented as hard directly as a sea power. That was never really in their purview. And when the 1300s and 1400s and the Ottomans start rising, at that point they were not that far behind what Europe was doing. They weren't. It's really the fact that Europe is able to continue to capitalize on their being a little bit ahead and then being further ahead and then further ahead and then further ahead in their dominance of the sea that allows them to eventually solidify their control over the early modern world and the modern world in general.
He who controls sea controls all.
I thought that was the spice.
Yes, question from the audience.
Thank you, Jackson. I also just wanted to ask, during I'd like to say the 12 to 1400s, weren't prominent naval enemy of the Ottomans, the Venetians, for a while?
During the 12 to 1400s, who were all the provident naval guys? Is that what you said?
Something like that. So, well, first of all,
He's saying were the Venetians the most
advanced?
Were they a
like they're-
prominent enemy of the Ottomans?
okay,
or
so
just-
that's a good
The
question.
Venetians?
That's a good question. So the Italians were
Next.
never really that powerful as far as like
Oh, no,
their
too French.
well the varying Italians,
Yeah.
right? Because there's no one Italian
Oh, yeah,
state,
not
right? There's
similar-
Venetians,
yeah.
there's Genoese, Milan. There's like a center around Rome, which
Yeah,
is really
yeah,
just the
yeah.
Vatican, right? Like, so like
similar
you
to how
have-
the Greeks were back then. Yes.
it's different, but like the Italian states were never militarily dominant. They were financially dominant, right? Like they controlled the finances in ways
church.
that not just the church,
Banking.
this is the bankers,
Double entry
the Genoese and the Venetians and a couple of the other smaller states, also Florence, were able to control the income using places like, for example, like Chios, like the island where my family's from that I've mentioned a couple times, had a deep water port right off the coast of a place called Izmir. It was one of the terminuses of the Silk Road. So like the Silk Road, you'd have people coming over the mountains with all their stuff. They'd end at the sea because that's where all the Silk Road termini were at the sea. And then they'd be carried across in boats to a deep water port where they'd be loaded onto European ships and then sailed into Europe. And the Europeans would pay a lot of money for all the travel that went on and all the goods that came over. But all those boats and all that money went straight through Italy first for a long time. Chios was controlled by the Genoese. The Knights of St. John controlled Rhodes. A lot of the varying islands were controlled by varying city-states.
Does that answer your question?
Kinda, yeah.
Thank you.
So not military, just financial.
I get you now.
The military command, like the military powers at sea in the 1400s. You're talking about the Spanish, the Dutch, and the British, basically.
Yes,
Yeah,
Britain.
yeah. And really, more than anything, I'd say there was the Spanish, and I think in
What
the
was
beginning,
really
and
just-
there's
had
a
that
lot
whole
of trading, and
Yeah, I mean, it was Spain and Britain. Dutch was doing their thing.
Well, the Dutch were very powerful too in the
Yeah,
East.
that's what I mean. The Dutch were doing their thing.
Yeah, they're making
but
money, making
they
money.
kind of just like, from what I remember, were doing their own thing.
Yeah, it was its own.
They
thing.
weren't-
Well, the Shogun show, I believe, is about the hostility between the Dutch
Yes.
and the British. Right?
Yes.
Right?
Well, no. The show. Okay. So.
I read the book. I was so young, and I've only gotten up to episode 4. Full disclosure.
Okay, so I actually watched the whole
At this
thing,
point
and
in
I'm a
time.
big kind of historical nerd
Not
about that
on
type
that,
of stuff.
yeah.
So.
He likes the Japans.
So actually, it was about the Dutch and the British. They were actually in cahoots together. They were against the Portuguese.
Oh, the Portuguese.
And
also.
the Spaniards, because they were it was the Catholics with the Portuguese and the Spaniards
Right.
versus the Protestants with the Dutch and the British. What happened was the Portuguese were basically trying to make Japan into essentially like a Catholic country, because the Catholics believe they can take whatever the fuck they want and kind of make it into their own thing.
I know they would disbalance the dynamic between.
Yes.
Yeah, I got it.
And the Dutch just basically they didn't give a shit about religion. They just wanted trading.
They just want money.
Yeah. So, and it's the same thing with the British. However, it ended up being the Dutch became the main. If you've ever seen Samurai Champloo, there's the Dutch guy who comes in about halfway through, and he has a whole episode because the Dutch became the main trading force in Japan. Once
That's
Japan isolationized, they kicked out the Portuguese and the Catholics because like, no, we're not. And then they basically just said, no, we're not going to become Catholics. Period. We don't like this anymore. And they're like,
Yeah.
but the Dutch didn't give a shit, and we want guns and gunpowder and all that other imported European steel and stuff.
Yeah.
And that's when you see a larger increase towards like European style Yoroi too, because more solid metal breastplates and stuff.
Yeah. A lot of things change around then. I mean, the introduction of Eastern trade and gunpowder in particular revolutionizes the way they make defenses, boats, castles become obsolete,
everything, yes.
armor becomes obsolete.
A
Obviously,
lot.
there's no need to have armor if you're just going to get shot in the chest and die. So, like, yeah, a lot of things change. Rifling on guns, like all this stuff just starts to cascade over
Check
time.
out our firearms episode.
Yeah, it's been a fire.
Even before then, when it
Part
came
one.
to like bows and arrows and stuff, they were like bodkin tip arrows, or the samurai would
Yeah.
shoot for the face and stuff.
Ballistas,
There's-
just
there's-
all different siege weapons.
It's-
crossbows. Crossbows would go straight through plate mail and things like that.
Compound
Like, it's-
crossbows
I mean-
were strong enough to go through plate mail, but like really, but puts an end to most of the medieval style of defenses. Has to be like the screw bores and the cannons and the farther firing, larger explosive ordnances. When you look at like the way they construct most defenses in general changes because they go from flat to circular, and a lot changes then.
Yeah, I
The
mean,
whole theory of warfare changes.
a lot of Japan at that point the only reason they mostly stuck to a lot of their more feudal was more partially out of tradition and their isolationism than it was.
Yeah.
And even then, that's also kind of a historical itself too, especially during the Sengoku Jedi. It's a lot to do with like weird historical nationalistic twisting during World War II and stuff and
Yeah,
everything,
yeah.
which is a whole different side story. But yeah, when you look at it
Found his
historically.
niche.
When you look at it historically, it's very funky.
But I mean, one thing that you will say
Everyone's got a
that
niche.
you could usually say that that is syntactically correct and also kind of like homogenous between the two cultures is that in both cases it was a little bit of back looking and a little bit of not forward looking that leads them to not realize that there's this whole other world of information that they're not absorbing. Like saying that the Japanese couldn't have realized that they were falling behind and could have used some from part A to fill in part B to get to part C is the same reason that like the Ottomans fall behind and they're not able to win a race at sea. They instead of learning from like Christian knowledge, it starts to become haram, right? It starts to become a thing that they can't do because it's outlawed by the Sultan to learn from Christian knowledge in a way that in earlier periods it wasn't, right? And so So like now, instead of learning, this is after Piri Reis would have been alive, but like
Right, yeah.
in later years after Piri Reis, in like the 1650s, 1700s, suddenly it becomes it suddenly becomes very difficult to take the same type of information from foreign knowledge the way you would have earlier, because now they're losing ground to it. That's good. They're losing ground to
I
the.
might try a little bit of that out of curiosity.
Go for it.
I don't have a spare cup offhand. Fact checker!
What do you need?
Can you give us
Cup, por favor.
or
Be a cup that.
they're underneath the counter over there.
There's one on the counter.
Yeah.
That works too.
So yeah, basically, I mean, like it's not a lack of.
Just give me like a little like a shot's worth.
You got it.
Still gotta
It's
drive.
not a matter of an inability to.
Thank you kindly.
It's not an inability to win the race in the beginning
That
that
sounds good.
that costs them. It's an inability to keep up.
Just in case.
I'm not one really much for liquor usually.
There, you're all good. It's not an inability to win the race in the beginning that costs them. It's the slow falling behind and then ignoring how they're falling behind that costs them, and eventually ends up both making this irrelevant and also, to some degree, making the topic not as well known as it could be. Obviously, if the Ottomans won the race, it would be a different world. We'd all be doing things differently. It would, instead of being the British superimposing their power upon the whole world, it would be Ottoman power.
Yeah, I've said that
Everything
once or
would be different.
I've said that at least once or twice. Based off of, you have to take history how the victor won it.
Yeah.
I mean, let's look at what happened in World War I or World War II. If,
Sure.
For fuck's sake, Germany won in either one of those, or Austria in World War I, or Japan, or like it would be totally radically different from where we are, and that's just the most recent extreme example.
Not just making it like a Marvel what if thing, but just like it's not a matter of like learning lessons from history. People who don't learn lessons are doomed to repeat it. It's more of a people who don't learn lessons from history can never build upon it, right? Like it's a building thing. You have to learn what didn't work so that you can learn how to make things work in the future with what you have, and also learning how people lose over the successive centuries, that it costs them time and effort. And losing isn't fun, but it happens slowly. Like eventually it's obvious, but it happens slowly, and not understanding how one culture is able to superimpose itself over another culture, or one culture can win a cultural battle with another culture over time.
We tend to seem to almost cyclically go through large cultural shifts.
Yeah.
Especially the more we like expanded globally, to the point where it almost became very like more rapid, like World War I, World War II, the entire Cold
Korea,
War,
Vietnam,
the internet, like the cultural shifts that we've gone through as we both expanded technologically and globally. Like it's like what you would have saw as a cultural revolution.
I would argue that
500 years ago would have taken way longer and almost structured a little bit like.
Yeah, I was going to say the leaps and bounds that we made from the early 1900s to the 2000s is probably a larger gap than almost anywhere else in history.
Yeah,
I mean,
but like
my
I'm saying,
dad
that causes our cultural, like our shift in how we view and
Of course, I mean, what we did, we ended up being connected to people. We developed the phone. We developed airplanes. We made commercial flights available. We had all sorts of things that expanded the world and changed the world from 1900 to 2000 more rapidly, more extremely than anywhere else. I mean, you have like the advancements of ship going from rowboats to sails, and then sails and rowboats, and you had steam-powered engines on boats and things like that. But it wasn't anywhere near as extreme as, motherfucker, you're flying in the air.
Well, I mean, put it this way, right? Like, there's a parlance that says the humanity's potential technology doubles every 18 months. If your potential technology is a wheel, there's not a lot of doubling to do, right? What do? You literally tell
Two wheels.
Then maybe you hitch it to a horse, right? And then after you hitch
Four
it to
wheels.
a horse, what's your next step? Well, what
Two
about
horse.
raised highways? Raised highways is a step. Paved roads is a step.
I was going to say
Everything-
two horse.
This is all steps, right? These are steps that take time to develop. And if potential technology
Look at the
doubles up-
rise in AI in the past 5 years.
But that's what my point is, right? Like now, if you're developing technology so fast,
Your grandma's getting
you're-
scammed by a fake you.
it's like rolling downhill, right? But there's also something that could be said about that from this time period too. If you want to be totally honest about it, like you're talking about learning to both embrace, harness, and understand the weapons with which you're working. If the weapons are knowledge, the Ottoman Empire rejects.
Remember, knowledge is power.
It's more than that. It's a weapon and it's also a defense, right? It's
Yes.
both. So like the Ottoman Empire weaponizes their ability to control knowledge in a way that the Catholic Church had done, and much like what happened with the Catholic Church, it costs them, right? It costs them their control of the society, and it costs them their control over the world in general. In the same vein, right? Like you can't let technology go unchecked. You have to harness it. It's like Paul Atreides in Dune. You got to ride that motherfucker, right? Like you can't just let it eat you, you know. And it's hard. It's hard to imagine this type of potential power being something that we can't just let run loose, right? AI or computer power, like you have to be on top of it. You have to be ahead of it. But you also have to understand that if you don't use it, somebody else will, and you have to be able to be the one to use it better and be on top of it, in front of it, instead of letting somebody else be the one to dictate the pace. And that's just something that, like, over time and history, I think
Just ask
information in general just becomes it's the way in which societies pivot. They pivot on the potential to use the most advanced information at the time that exists. It's just the way it is.
For more information, ask your personal FBI profiler.
NSA, too.
Hey, can you tell us more about why information is important?
Yeah, right. Seriously, I mean, it's.
Did you
it's
say
not-
Siri?
How about just what Meta does, gathering metadata to make it a financial windfall, right? Like,
I mean, well,
there's
that's
a reason why he's one of the
everybody,
richest people on the planet.
Other people's personal data.
And then they want to bitch
Whatever
that
he
TikTok
said.
does it because they're technically Chinese.
It's not just them. It's anybody
know,
anybody
it's
who
a
can
joke.
harness that information, though, right?
I know,
Because
it's
they have
just the
everyone's
joke of the
personal
matter.
yeah, right. But they have everyone's personal preferences. That's one of many examples of how you use technology these days. But
I
like,
mean, at
it's the
this
same
point,
thing.
I'm like, it's so, like, everybody's like, oh, fucking microchips, like, bullshit. Like, just look at what the fuck is in your pocket. Like,
It's following
it's
you around all the
ridiculous.
time. It's
There's a
little
reason that
computer.
this shit gets banned on military bases.
Yes, correct.
Birds aren't real.
I mean, when
Yeah,
my
they don't need the burbs,
when I was growing up,
but they do anyway.
they'd put all the scientists who were working on military stuff into a room lined in lead, so it couldn't be X-rayed, it couldn't be heard what's going on in there. It was a black zone. You can't do that as much anymore. It's almost
Yeah, that's
impossible.
toxic.
Hell with that attitude.
It's almost impossible to imagine sequestering a certain portion of the world away from technology anymore.
Oh, they're still doing it.
They're trying, but it's impossible. It's not possible. Like the last indigenous populations who were unexposed to the world were exposed almost 30 years ago now, 20, 30 years ago. There's no pocket of the world you can't reach with technology. It's really insane. But anyway.
Not with that attitude.
Do we have anything to close us off?
I mean, I still got my my meme here, but you know, I've been referencing.
I think
every now and
you
again.
did.
Is there anything else you want to finish up with?
I think
before
you did want to ask. I think at some point about the what's going on in colleges right now. Since I was a college professor, I think you said. All I
We
was
referenced it earlier. just,
yeah. All I would say about that is
before we
that
started recording.
yeah. It's all the same. It's all the same soup, right? It's all the same soup.
I don't remember.
You can
asking
try to
this.
repress information as much as you want. You could try to repress people's impulses and will as much as you want. The more you squeeze, the harder it is to keep things in your hand, right? Like, that's just the way it is. You can't try to keep people down through force. It's just not enough. And I don't think that trying to repress the opinions of a quarter of the population using force is a great idea.
I don't remember asking this, but
It's the same thing. Anyway,
anyone else? Peanut Gallery? D?
peanut gallery.
Anything to close us off?
I mean, you know, like I said, historically,
I will say the same thing I always say. History is why I drink.
like I said, historically, you could trace the rise of hentai to the fall of Constantinople, and then it all gets fucked up by a weasel and a large hadron collider. So, do you know about the weasel timeline?
No, I don't. What is the weasel timeline? Do you want to educate me?
Real quick. Okay, so you know the CERN Large Hadron Collider?
Okay.
Well, during one of its earlier test runs, a weasel or a marmot got in and got zapped
Oh boy.
and killed. And people think that this directly correlates the same thing how Harambe caused the timeline to fuck.
Yeah, I get your point here.
That thing caused the divergent timeline we're in now, where we're in an alternate universe where everything's fucking up because
of weasels.
Goddamn marmots.
yes.
Good night, people. Is that where we end it? On
mean-
goddamn marmots?
Goddamn.
It's better than the
marmots.
hentai ending.
Good night, people.
Get hype.
What?